I had already transferred the ownership of the house to my parents. Divorce was no longer a thought, it was a decision. James stood across from me, his face stripped of any warmth. He pointed toward the door and told me to leave, his voice sharp and merciless. Insults spilled from his mouth one after another, each one met with the approving smiles of his parents, who stood behind him like silent judges. Their expressions made it clear they believed he was right. I listened without protest. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I simply picked up the suitcase I had packed days earlier. As I walked out of the house, calm and steady, my mind was already several steps ahead of them. The plan was complete. They had no idea what they had just agreed to. My name is Sally. I turned 50 this year. It has been many years since James and I married, long enough for our children to grow up and build lives of their own far away from us. For most of my life, I worked as an ordinary office employee, collecting a modest salary and doing what was expected of me. But recently, my life took a different turn. Through a friend's introduction, I began teaching handmade accessory crafting. What started as a hobby quietly became my profession. Each day now is filled with the sound of conversation, creativity, and the simple satisfaction of making something with my hands. Some people scoff at the idea of turning a hobby into a livelihood. I don't. For the first time in years, I feel fulfilled. James and I met at the company where I used to work. He was an employee at one of our client firms, and through repeated meetings and after-work gatherings, we grew close. We married for love, or at least what we believed was love back then. 3 years into our marriage, we welcomed a healthy baby boy. Our son grew up well. He graduated from a prestigious university, married happily, and now lives a stable and successful life. From the outside, it looked like we had done everything right. Inside our home, however, things slowly fell apart. Over the years, James changed. The gentle, considerate man I married disappeared, replaced by someone demanding and cold. To him, I became less of a wife and more of a live-in housekeeper. His preferences changed daily. His temper grew shorter. He blamed me for the smallest inconveniences, and verbal abuse became routine. I wanted to escape. I dreamed of starting over. But the mortgage chained me in place. Then James quit his job without explanation. He spent his days lying around the house, contributing nothing. Housework, finances, emotional labor, everything fell on my shoulders. He didn't even pretend to help. The house we lived in had been newly rebuilt, and I paid for it. Every cent. I managed the finances, saved carefully over the years, and oversaw the reconstruction myself. This house was more than walls and windows. It was my dream. I refused to let it end up in James's hands if I walked away. The kitchen, especially, was designed exactly the way I wanted: spacious, practical, warm. It reflected the life I had envisioned for myself. James offered opinions during the planning stage, but he didn't pay for a single thing. I did. Still, I tried to accommodate him where I could. Despite delays and setbacks, the house was completed just as I imagined. When I first stepped inside, I felt genuine happiness. But the cost far exceeded our estimates. We were forced to take on a large loan, something neither of us had anticipated doing in our 50s. It was frightening, yet I believed the comfort and joy of our new home would make it worthwhile. James didn't agree. He sulked, complained that the house was unnecessary, accused me of wasting money. Eventually, he stopped talking to me altogether. Instead, he began acting out, leaving trash everywhere, deliberately making messes, doing small, petty things meant to provoke me. Every day, I asked myself the same question. When will this end? A few months after moving in, the doorbell rang unexpectedly. We weren't expecting anyone. As I headed toward the entrance, James suddenly stood up and went ahead of me, as if he already knew who was there. Moments later, laughter and loud voices echoed through the hallway. When the living room door opened, I froze. Standing there were my in-laws, Harold and Alice. From the beginning, my relationship with them had been strained. When James announced our marriage, they treated me with thinly veiled contempt, criticizing my background and looking down on me openly. Even on our wedding day, their smiles never reached their eyes. After the marriage, their interference never stopped. Over time, the distance between us grew, and I assumed it was for the best. Their sudden appearance now caught me off guard. I greeted them politely. They walked straight past me. Alice bumped into my shoulder deliberately, as if I weren't even there. Without acknowledging me, they began admiring the house, especially the kitchen. James beamed with pride as he showed them around, soaking in their admiration. When they returned to the living room, James's expression changed. His voice rose as he ordered me to hurry and prepare tea and snacks. I did as I was told. Still, it wasn't enough. His parents criticized the hospitality, commenting on the tea and snacks as if they were evaluating a servant. Harold spoke with casual dissatisfaction, then leaned back, glancing around the house with approval. Then James smiled broadly and said something that made my blood run cold. He invited his parents to move in with us. As if I didn't exist at all. They listened to James, then turned and left. I stood there, watching their backs disappear down the path. The distance between James and me had never felt wider. He laughed and chatted easily with his parents, a sound I hadn't heard from him in years. That warmth was never meant for me. After that day, my in-laws began coming to the house more often. At first, it was a few visits a month, then every week. Soon, it became nearly every day. Their criticism of me never stopped, and James never once defended me. Instead, he joined in, accusing me of being stubborn, blaming me for our son's hardships, twisting every situation until I was at fault. I swallowed everything. Apologies were the only words I was allowed to speak. Worse still, they began coming when I wasn't home. James welcomed them freely, and they treated the house like a playground. Beer cans littered the floor, empty bottles rolled under furniture, alcohol soaked into the brand new rug I had worked so hard to choose. The house began to smell stale and dirty. When I protested, James scoffed. Despite contributing nothing, no income, no labor, he complained endlessly. His gambling only deepened the nightmare. Used betting slips appeared everywhere, silent proof of money bleeding away. Talking to him was useless. Every loss came from my salary, earned through long hours and exhaustion. About a month into this routine, I came home early one day. They were all there, lounging comfortably, as if I were the intruder. When I questioned them, I was met with cold sarcasm and irritated looks. To them, my presence was inconvenient. That was the moment something inside me went still. I didn't explode. I didn't cry. I decided to plan. Not long after, something strange happened. On a day they clearly expected me to be gone, my in-laws arrived again. I commented dryly on how carefully they avoided me these days. They ignored the remark and walked straight in. James greeted them with a smile. Together, they inspected the house, lingering in the kitchen, scrutinizing the bathroom, opening doors, checking corners. It felt less like a visit and more like an evaluation. When they left, they looked satisfied, as though they had confirmed something important. I asked James what that was about. He brushed me off. His eyes avoided mine. That was when I knew he was hiding something. I didn't confront him. I watched. Then one evening, after work, I saw a large moving truck parked in front of the house. Moving Center, the logo read. James was speaking with the driver. When he noticed me, he turned away and slipped inside. Moments later, my in-laws arrived, greeting me casually before James ushered them in. Inside, I froze. The house was unrecognizable. My furniture, gone. My belongings, gone. In their place sat my in-laws' old, worn furniture, arranged neatly, confidently, as if the house already belonged to them. They surrounded me with smug smiles. Finally, they said there was something they needed to tell me. James let out a heavy sigh and announced that he had sold the house to his parents. He wanted a divorce. His parents nodded, clearly pleased, as if this were a performance meant to humiliate me. I didn't react. I signed the divorce papers. I removed my wedding ring and placed it on the table. Then I said I would leave. They thought they had one. What they didn't know was that I had already suspected them. Because of their constant visits while I was away, I had installed surveillance cameras throughout the house, connected to my phone. At first, I watched out of curiosity. Then I found the footage, James and his parents laughing, discussing how they would sell the house and push me out. That was when I acted. Using the information I gathered, I transferred the home loan entirely into James's name. If they wanted the house, they could have the responsibility too. The mortgage, $1,900 a month, had always been paid from my salary. I knew they couldn't afford it. I moved into a new home, fully furnished, peaceful, and mine alone. For the first time in years, I slept deeply. On my day off, I slept past noon. Then the doorbell rang. James and his parents stood outside. They barged in, slamming documents onto my table, accusing me of changing the loan without permission. They had received the notice immediately after I left. They were unemployed. They had no money. They couldn't pay the mortgage. James shouted that he refused to pay. Calmly, I explained interest rates, penalties, and how fast debt grows when ignored. He laughed at first, until he looked it up himself, his face drained of color. I suggested he find a job. That was when the truth spilled out. No savings, no assets, gambling debts, no steady income. They begged me to help, reminding me of our years together. I closed the door. They called the police out of spite and were removed from my property. Unable to keep the house, they moved into a small apartment on the outskirts of town. James found a part-time job and barely scraped by. As for me, life only grew quieter and better. I focused on teaching. I started a handmade crafts blog. It gained attention. My income doubled. Invitations to teach workshops poured in. I had no desire to remarry. One day, I found an old household account book from our early marriage. I smiled softly, placed it back on the shelf, and decided to build my happiness alone. This time, on my own terms.